The carriage ride from Troy to Paris was a chilly but uneventful one. In the span of just a single generation, the bustling city had undergone a remarkable transformation. Its once muddy streets were now paved with stone. The market of Le Champeau was enclosed. The majestic Louvre Castle was recently finished, and the old Roman walls that squeezed the city were now surpassed by the new wall, dotted with well-designed towers and gatehouses. The College of Dihu was built 2 decades prior, and the Sorbonne was significantly expanded. But no landmark on the tour guide given to Blanche was as breathtaking as the recently completed Cathedral of Notre Dame, a shining example of the flourishing new Gothic style. It was there that the Christmas Mass in honor of the birth of Christ was celebrated. Philip himself led the procession alongside the Archbishop of Reims, William Whitehands. Shortly after, the young couple found themselves within the halls of the Louvre Castle, partaking in yet another feast. Yet Theobald couldn't help but sense that something was afoot. Amidst the joyous spirits and evergreen plants, Philip exerted a dark, brooding undertone. This unease had first manifested itself when one of the courtesans insisted that Blanche be seated as far away from the royal table as possible. Whether it was a foul mood or something more sinister, Theobald knew that his personal concerns would have to be set aside. He was on a greater mission, and he did everything he could to get closer to the king's ear. The following day, he was granted an audience and ascended the cold steps towards the wooden throne, adorned with decorative carvings.
Charlemagne himself would be dwarfed by such an illustrious court, dear uncle. Your reign has been a boon to this city and the multitudes dwelling within.
It is the result of hard toil, meticulous planning, and the unwavering support of loyal subjects such as yourself, peer of France. With the divine grace, we strive to complete the work at hand and extend our dominion to lands that are rightfully ours. Nephew, we are on the cusp of eradicating sin and reclaiming our birthright. The roads will be mended and made safe. Once desolate lands will receive charters and flourish, and you and I will bask in the sun, reaping the fruits of our labors.
Indeed, indeed we will. But, sire, I come before you bearing urgent tidings from Rome. Our homeland is secure and flourishing, and you have built the greatest church and university this side of the Alps. But yet, the Holy Sepulchre still languishes in enemy hands. A call has been issued, and it is our sacred duty to answer. It is in you, after God, that we put all of our trust to be our sacred leader.
Then listen well, nephew. You must set aside these frivolous cross-bearing thoughts. I met with Cardinal Peter Capuano many times, and I assure you that as many calls before, this is merely a ploy for the papacy to increase its influence. Rome seeks to dictate what we can and cannot do, who we are allowed to hate and who to love. But none of the songs you heard convey the truth. I was there. I saw whole ships swallowed by the tempest. I saw the thousands of graves being dug near Acre, noble knights begging for the mercy of death, and a foul stench you could not hide from. And while the valiant are abroad, those left behind skulk in the shadows, chipping away at their inheritance. No, my friend. Now is not the time to abandon all that we have worked for.
Abandon? But is it not the scripture that reads, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. The kingdom we may forge there will be one none can take away from you. And while there, we will all be granted the pilgrim's protection." For John to violate that would be an atrocity equal only to what his father did to Thomas Becket. You have given us so much, Your Majesty, and it was your leadership that safeguarded Acre. But for all of us who have lost fathers and brothers in this holy war, our hearts cannot rest in the sun, knowing that the cross they bore was not taken by us. My own brother followed you into battle and continued your good work as the leader of the French contingent. Is him falling off a balcony and being crushed by a dwarf truly the final chapter in his story? Has the catastrophe at Hattin truly been redeemed? Would I not be committing the gravest of sins by turning my back on his legacy?
You come here seeking counsel and purpose, and I give it to you now, not as your sovereign, but as your uncle and a friend. I've spent years in prayer seeking answers. Crowds called me Dieudonne, Auguste, and Charlemagne's descendant. My father exalted me as his only son and heir. After I was lost in the woods for 2 days during that boar hunt, he became the first Capetian to travel to England so he could pray for my life at Canterbury. On the return voyage, he was struck with paralysis and never uttered another word. His inscription still reads, "You who survive him are the successor to his dignity. You diminish his line if you diminish his renown." But I survived him. I survived Richard. I survived Barbarossa. I survived Salah ad-Din and many others. I was punished for swaying off course, but now I discern my purpose. Despite the proclamations of the vicar and his ilk, God has placed me on this earth to preserve the dignity of France, and that is what I shall do.
Should you do that, the Pope will place us all under an interdict, or worse, excommunicate us. You will tarnish our renown by denying this calling. The storied Frankish tradition of unwavering courage will be besmirched, and throughout all of Christendom, we will be mocked as cowards. You fled once, and now God is giving you a sign. You must heed this call and see this pilgrimage through. If your mind is so set on breaking the very truce you just signed with John, then at least let another take the reins and fulfill the duty in your stead.
Is this the truth of the matter? Is this the very crux of it all? Did my mother put you up to this? Or my wretched half-sister Marie? Intrigue everywhere I turn. Look at all that I've done for this city, despite the ceaseless attempts by people like your father and uncle. Now it is you and Baldwin who plot to supplant me. Is that why you married that Navarrese harlot? Are you to be the new crusading paragon, serving at John's will? You would abandon your king in his time of need, stripping me away of my men-at-arms, just so you can go be the hero?
You may be my liege, but I will not tolerate your disrespectful demeanor, uncle. You don't know a thing about Blanche, yet you insult her while betting on a unlawful wife. How dare you chastise me with Agnes of Morania by your side, while keeping your true wife captive? There is no clandestine alliance, there's no conspiracy. And I did come here as a friend, seeking counsel from whom I deemed to be the wisest man I knew. When you demanded that I come in person and pay your homage last year, I harbored no suspicion. Now I see that there is no amount of cobblestone that can conceal your paranoia. My brother followed you into war, and you abandoned him. I shall not repeat the same mistake. I have no qualms with Englishmen. Fare thee well, sire.
You would turn your back on your king and defy his command?
I will follow my heart and obey my true master, one that preaches courage, not cowardice.
And you will have nothing but festering pustules and abject misery to show for it. Theobald the betrayer.
Disappointment, anger, and fury welled up in Theobald's heart as winter's icy grip tightened its hold on Paris. Everywhere he looked, people reveled in acts of kindness, sang joyous songs, and celebrated the 12 days of Christmas. Seeking solace, he ventured into the ancient Saint Denis church, where even the enchanting choirs failed to distract him from his turmoil. Only thoughts of Blanche kept him from storming into Philip's Keep and potentially exacerbating the situation. With Epiphany's arrival on January 6th, the festivities reached their zenith. The three kings, splendidly costumed, paraded through the cities bearing gifts for the infant Christ. The Feast of Lights illuminated the city, as candles adorned every window, symbolizing the guiding star of Bethlehem. It was on that day that Theobald had an epiphany of his own. It came in the form of a man, a scholar by the name of Alexander Neckham. The tall and slender Englishman shared his birthday with none other than Richard I, and his mother was hired as a wet nurse at the royal court. With the support of his foster brother, he was free to pursue his academic interests, which led him to the Sorbonne. He approached Theobald in the middle of prayer and hoped to gain his trust and patronage by giving him a tour of the university. The institution had already earned great renown, particularly because the newly elected Pope Innocent III had once delved into the depths of theology within these very halls, during his earlier years when he was still Lothario de Conti. The young count eagerly explored each of the four faculties: arts, medicine, law, and theology, and was overwhelmed with the numerous students rushing to get from one hall to the other. They were divided into 4 nations based on regional and linguistic differences: France, Normandy, Picardy, and England. In here, as Alexander explained, one could find books covering every topic imaginable. The Crusader movement brought many artifacts from the East, but it also brought knowledge long forgotten. Century-old texts meticulously translated were reshaped and woven into the fabric of Western philosophy. It was here that Peter Lombard published the 4 books of sentences, the standard textbook of theology. The library contained the very first translation of the Quran by Robert of Kedden. Half a century earlier, his work fundamentally shifted Christian opinion, which regarded Islam as a Christian heresy, into a new understanding in which the belief was categorized as a completely separate sect, radicalizing thousands. Amalric of Benna, who Theobald personally met, was more interested in the ancient world, trying to reshape the understanding of the world by infusing the philosophy of Aristotle with the worldviews of Christianity, thus becoming the most popular lecturer in the Sorbonne. Amongst his most radical ideas was his conclusion that there is no other life or resurrection, that man's fulfillment is in this life alone. As for Alexander Neckham, he was more interested in the practical sciences, devising a new concept of navigation based on many observations of English sailors. He believed that a magnetized needle mounted on a pivot could save a ship or even a fleet from murky waters or starless nights. His thirst for knowledge extended to the medical sciences, where he pored over the works of Galen, Avicenna, and Urso of Calabria. Theobald had always possessed an affinity towards the sciences, and was now firmly convinced that the answer to his quest rested in the Sorbonne, not the Louvre. He and Alexander became close acquaintances, and in the coming months, multiple carriages rode from Paris to Troyes, transporting manuscripts of Aristotle, Plato, Aesop, Galen, Virgil, and many others. In her youth, Blanche was surrounded by many brilliant minds, including Robert of Kedden, as her father, Sancho the Wise, was a patron of the arts and sciences, so she encouraged him every step of the way. After just over a month in Paris, the couple was now returning home. Theobald got his answer, and while it was not the one he had hoped for, it led him down a path that would change history forever.